It seems like every year, pro athletes in the NFL, NBA, and MLB are setting new record-breaking deals. But not all athletes are pulling in big contracts. In fact, a lot of what an athlete will earn over his career depends to a surprising degree on the league they play in. The National Football League had some of the flashiest contracts in 2019. That makes sense since the NFL is one of the biggest and most profitable sports leagues in the US. But on average, it's not paying its players nearly as much as those in the MLB and the NBA. There are three big reasons why NFL players make less on average: league structure, salary caps, and guaranteed money for players. As for the NBA, well, their players have it especially good. In addition to having a higher average pay per player, they also make more money off the court than their peers in the NFL and MLB. That's partly because NBA players have a bigger fan base outside of the US. NBA star LeBron James landed one of the biggest endorsement deals ever with Nike that could pay him $1 billion over his lifetime. So why do players in America's three biggest sports leagues make wildly different salaries? In order to answer that, first we have to understand how sports contracts work. Player contracts are partly based on how a specific league is structured: the number of games in a season, the number of teams in a league, and the number of players on a team. NFL teams have 53 players on an active roster. The MLB has 25, and the NBA has 15. The NFL season is the shortest of the three. There are 32 teams that play 16 games throughout the regular season. In total, there are 256 games played collectively. The NBA has 30 teams across its league that play 82 games in a season, bringing the total amount of games played to 1,230. Then there's the MLB, which has the most amount of games played of the three leagues. During its regular season, there are 30 MLB teams that play 162 games in a season, totaling to 2,430 games played collectively. Even though teams across all three leagues tend to prioritize their spending on star players, in terms of average salary per player, the NFL ranks dead last out of the three. A lot of it boils down to basic math. The NFL plays the least number of games in a season, and it employs the greatest number of players. There are 1,696 active players in the NFL. In the MLB, there are 877, and for the NBA, there's 439. Then there's the number of teams. Every league has a common pool of cash that is divvied up among teams every season. The more teams there are, the smaller the cut of the pie. The size of the cash pool has a lot to do with the TV broadcasting deals signed by each league. Ironically, more games doesn't directly translate to bigger TV rights for leagues.
So when you take a look at the data that we look at, the NFL has the highest percentage of avid fans across what we call the Big Four, which is the three other stick and ball leagues next to the NFL. Their fan base is massive. It's almost half of the U.S. population sort of reports some interest in the NFL. The length of season thing is actually kind of interesting because if you think about it, scarcity of games, right, could potentially work in the NFL's favor. There's just a concentrated level of interest across a shorter number of games.
Each year, the NFL receives an estimated $6.5 billion. The NBA gets an estimated $2.6 billion. And the MLB makes an estimated $1.9 billion.
And so the players receive today 51 cents out of every dollar. And that is, 51 cents out of the entire $8 billion franchise that is the NBA enterprise, that is the NBA. And that certainly does include the broadcast agreements, the local agreements, the national agreements, digital, international, any type of broadcast agreement is included in our overall pool of basketball-related income, and 51 cents of it is delivered to the players through the vehicle of our salary cap/luxury tax system.
But player pay isn't all about league structure. It also has a whole lot to do with how well a player performs for a team and the rules each league sets through the collective bargaining agreement with player unions. Every league has its own set of rules around how it decides to pay its players. It's called a collective bargaining agreement. The CBA is a set agreed terms made by the league's players association and the league itself. It covers everything from the number of games, rookie wages, practice requirements, healthcare, and player contracts. Each league has its own CBA, and in turn, each league has a different set of standards of how player contracts work. One core component of the CBA is something known as revenue sharing. Every league has a common pool of cash that is split among teams and players each season. The bulk sum of that money comes from television and media rights deals. Another key component of the CBA is the salary cap. It is the total amount of money each team in a league is allowed to spend on player salaries. In 2019, The NBA salary cap was set to $109.14 million. The NFL's salary cap was set to $188.2 million. And the MLB technically doesn't have a salary cap. They have a tax system in place, but we'll get back to that. The salary cap helps create competitive balance among teams because it prevents richer teams from signing all the best players. The NFL has a hard cap, meaning that teams in the league can't go over the salary cap no matter what. The NBA is a little bit more lax. It has a soft cap. The league issues a base salary cap number which teams can go over as long as they pay a luxury tax. But there's a limit to how much a team can go over that soft cap.
You are able to exceed it for a variety of reasons. You're able to exceed it to re-sign your own players. That's the Larry Bird exception. You're able to sign a player off the market, a free agent, under the mid-level exception. You're able to trade for players who will bring you even higher over the salary cap under the assigned player exception. So we have a lot of exceptions to the cap. It keeps it soft, and that encourages owners and teams to give guarantees, to give long-term deals. It encourages them to be able to give generous deals and not necessarily to have to choose between one player or another.
The luxury tax limit helps prevent teams in bigger markets like New York and Chicago from overspending on players.
And so we agreed to put in place this luxury tax back in 1999 following our 6-month lockout, so that if you exceed that tax threshold, which is usually about $20 million over the cap, that's about where it is right now, then you're going to have to pay for it. You can do it, but you have to pay. And the tax is pretty significant. It's more, it used to be dollar for dollar, and now it's more than dollar for dollar. And it allows those teams who feel as if they really need to go, they have a window, they're going to take a run, they're able to do it, they're able to pay that tax, and they can still take these players in.
As for the MLB, they have something similar to the NBA soft salary cap, but it works a bit differently. Historically, the MLB has always seen big payroll disparities between big market teams and small market teams. In 2003, the MLB CBA implemented a luxury tax similar to the NBA's soft salary cap. It's called the competitive balance tax. MLB teams that exceed the predetermined payroll threshold are subject to this tax. Unlike the NBA, there's no luxury tax limit, so a team can pay over as much as they want as long as they pay the taxes and are okay with facing league penalties like lower draft picks. For 15 years, the New York Yankees weren't too concerned with the payroll threshold or loss of draft picks. The team paid over $341 million in tax penalties alone from 2003 to 2017. Another very important part of the league CBA is guaranteed contracts. A fully guaranteed contract ensures a player will receive the full value of their contract, no matter what. Unlike the MLB and NBA, not all contracts in the NFL are fully guaranteed. Even though on paper NFL players sign big flashy contracts, that doesn't mean they'll see all the money they've been promised. Unlike the NBA and MLB, guaranteed contracts aren't really a thing in the NFL. Take the Oakland Raiders quarterback Derek Carr. Carr's contract is a 5-year, $125 million contract. Of that $125 million, a little bit over $70 million is guaranteed. Compare that to the MLB's Yu Darvish. The pitcher's contract is a 6-year, $126 million contract that is fully guaranteed. That means no matter what happens to him, he's taking home all $126 million. Generally speaking, across all three leagues, there are basically two kinds of contracts: rookie and veteran contracts. Once a player completes their rookie deal, they can renegotiate for a new contract as a free agent. For the NFL, most first-round rookies and franchise-tag players have fully guaranteed contracts.
If you're looking at a big-time like quarterback or wide receiver, guys are looking at 5-year, sometimes 6-year contracts. And the first 2 to 3 years of those contracts could be potentially fully guaranteed. But past that, you get in an area where the only thing protecting that player against being released is his prorated signing bonus. So signing bonuses, say you have a $20 million signing bonus, there's a proration, which is an accounting tool for the salary cap, where that $20 million is divided by 5 if it's a 5-year contract, or even if it's a 6-year contract, because you can only prorate the contract over 5.
So other than first-round rookies and franchise-tagged players, there are no regulations forcing a team to guarantee every single dollar on a player's contract. Of all the veteran contracts in the NFL, only 13 have fully guaranteed contracts. 5 of those contracts are worth more than $10 million, and only 1 contract is for more than 1 year. Despite the NFL being famous for not paying their players' contracts in full, the MLB and NBA are known to have massive contracts worth hundreds of million dollars that are 100% guaranteed. MLB contracts are pretty straightforward. Since they are fully guaranteed, the value of the contract is typically divided evenly through the contract's length.
So let's say you and the team don't agree on a number. So you're going to come up with one number, you and your agent or whatever, and the team will come up with another number based on real statistics. So it's not like you're going to be at $100 million difference. So it's going to be based on a good amount of statistics. And then with that, the team can either accept, the team can deny, and you go to arbitration. So it's like a panel, and then the panel goes and discusses after February, I believe. And then with that, they either pick the teams or they pick yours. There's not in between, it's not anything. So they kind of base on the statistics of other players at your level in the league. And like I said, they're going to pick one or the other. So it's kind of, you put yourself in a position to probably get a higher contract or you're going to get something less. So
NBA contracts are very similar to the MLB's contracts. The Golden State Warriors player Steph Curry signed a 5-year, $201.2 million contract in 2017, meaning that he makes over $40 million each year. So even if he gets injured, Curry is still taking home $40 million. Another key difference is that some NBA players can make even more money off the court. In 2018, 3 of the top 10 athletes in the world with the highest earnings from endorsement deals were NBA players. No player in the top 10 played for the NFL or MLB. Endorsement deals are huge for NBA stars. It allows them to make a steady flow of cash outside of their contracts. Players can sign endorsement deals with pretty much any company, and these deals can prove to be very profitable well after a player retires. Take Shaquille O'Neal. He retired back in 2011, but he's continued to land multi-million-dollar brand deals since then. Brand endorsement deals tend to favor NBA athletes because basketball has a more international reach than baseball and football, and NBA stars have a huge following on social media. As for the MLB, Mike Trout has the highest paying contract in baseball, worth over $426 million over 12 years. Trout also makes an estimated $2.5 million from endorsement deals. Compare that to NBA star Kevin Durant. KD has a 4-year, $164 million contract with the Brooklyn Nets. But when you count in sponsorship dollars, the pay divide is bigger. In 2014, Durant signed a 10-year deal with Nike worth an estimated $300 million. Sneaker deals are huge for NBA stars. LeBron James' annual income from a sneaker deal is worth $32 million a year. For comparison, back in 2017, Odell Beckham Jr. signed the biggest sneaker deal in the NFL, worth $25 million over 5 years.
So LeBron, I just went and looked at his personal Instagram account. His most recent post is a picture of one of his Nike pairs of sneakers. So really strong promotion quality. It's a product placement, single use of a hashtag or mention, and it generated about 1.6 million total interactions on that post. So because of the quality of the promotion and the level of engagement that it's getting, it could be worth anywhere from $500,000 to $1 million in adjusted ad value based on the quality of the promotion and the engagement that it generated.
And LeBron James has a lifetime endorsement deal with Nike worth a rumored $1 billion over time. The Supermax contract is unique to the NBA, and it's one of the biggest contracts in sports. Players like Steph Curry and Russell Westbrook have Supermax deals over $200 million. It essentially boils down to this. It's a way for teams to extend players who have been in the league for 7 to 9 years to a 4 or 5 year contract. The Supermax contract is valued up to 35% of the salary cap for that year it begins, and then there's an 8% increase in salary, which is tacked on to each of the subsequent years of the contract. Supermax contracts were introduced in 2017. It was the league's solution to the problem of players upgrading to bigger market teams or winning teams. These contracts were designed to incentivize star players to stay put with the teams that drafted them. But before a player qualifies for a $200 million Supermax contract, they must meet a laundry list of requirements. Plus, players need to receive high-performance accolades in 2 of their most recent seasons or be named the MVP of any of the 3 previous seasons. Klay Thompson missed out on being part of the All-NBA team and was ineligible to get a Supermax deal. Players who have signed Supermax deals are often huge financial burdens on a team and can cripple the team's ability to sign or re-sign talent.
If you make it so that one star takes up a larger part, then it's going to be harder for you to be able to go out and fit in 2 or 3 star players. And so absolutely, I would say that, the more salary that you're paying to any individual player, the harder it's going to be to attract other players, because usually when you attract stars, you're doing it using room under the salary cap, and the less room you have, the less ability you have to go out into the market and bring in more players.
Essentially, if a team decides to offer a supermax contract, it can take up to a third of the team's salary cap space for that season, leaving roughly 2/3 of the team's salary cap space to be distributed among 14 other players. So far, only 5 players have signed supermax deals, so time will tell if supermax contracts are here to stay. So what does the future hold for sports contracts? It all depends on the changes that are being made and implemented by each league's collective bargaining agreement. Just take the NFL. It's the most profitable league compared to the MLB and NBA, but its players are not seeing the same guarantees as those leagues. But new changes are about to be made with the NFL's CBA that's set to expire at the end of the 2020 season. The NFL Players Association and the NFL teams are working to establish a new CBA for the 2021 season.
For almost the last 10 weeks, about every Monday or Tuesday, I've been in Chicago or parts nearby negotiating with the Players Association about our future labor agreement.
The MLB CBA is also set to expire in 2021, which can see changes like adjustments to the competitive balance tax. As for the NBA, the league reached an agreement on the CBA back in 2017. The deal will continue through the 2023 to 2024 season.
We were locked out for 6 months in 1998. There was no basketball until February of that year. We were locked out again in 2011. There was no basketball until Christmas Day. And so we've certainly demonstrated that, we're going to fight for what's right. Now, we have the ability and the wherewithal. I think it's expected that we're going to stand up and exert whatever leverage and ability we have.
A lot. And that I don't care about college basketball very much. I used to care a lot about college basketball. I care less now. I think that college basketball, though, I know college basketball would be significantly better if the one and done rule was taken away entirely. If you just granted me the powers to put rules on things, one of the rules that I put is we would do it like baseball. You either come out after high school or you got to go to college for 3 years. Or I would at least say 2 years, because I do care, as much as I'm not really that much of a college basketball fan, I do care a little bit about what happens with those programs. And for the NBA's purposes, they want the kids to go to college, because it's really dadgum hard to evaluate what an all-time great basketball, or not even what a what a generational player is doing against other kids in high school. Because the difference, I saw Julius Randle playing in high school a little bit, and it is apparent within 1 minute of watching a game in which a real NBA player is playing as a 17 or 18-year-old, immediately this dude is an NBA player, and he is just terrorizing every other kid that's on the court. I think that the next collective bargaining agreement, which I think is like 2024, maybe 2025, something like that, I think that we will see the end of the one and done. And there just will be some kind of concession the other way around. But I think college programs would be thrilled if they just put a stop to it. I know, like Mike Krzyzewski at Duke he hates it. I know he hates recruiting guys that he knows are only going to be in his school.
Gave in and said, well, this is what the league is. This is what it is. So
absolutely. And you're already seeing that with the way that the NCAA has shifted, because they literally were told they had to by the Supreme Court, but that they shifted on, endorsement deals and paying the players and all that sort of stuff. This is the next step in that process of just like kind of recognizing that this sort of like facade we put on of the student athlete and the romanticization of the student athlete, it applies to the third baseman on your college baseball team that's not going to play in the majors, or somebody who's on the rowing team or something. But it doesn't apply to the absolute top tier level of players. And we should stop making them do it. We should stop pretending like like LeBron James was going to get anything out of going to college for a year. It's just, what's the point? The NBA now has sort of started their own college program and internship, apprenticeship program. I would say that the NBA is out recruiting against Kentucky and Duke and Kansas and the rest of like the top-notch college programs. The NBA is actively out there competing and recruiting against those teams, those schools, to bring the best players to what they call the G League Ignite team. And they basically set up an academy in Los Angeles. You mentioned Sharif Abdul-Rahim earlier. He's the head of all this. He's going into these homes where Mike Krzyzewski has just been, or John Calipari or whoever else, and trying to get the best players to come and go to this academy.
Player, why not just go play basketball? Like instead of like this idea that I'm going to get an education and I'm going to major in something that's not going to do anything for me. I'm going to be there for 1 year. I'm going to take off. I remember back in college having literally a national college debate tournament, having a discussion or a debate. Actually, we debated against Rice, and we were debating whether or not Tim Duncan should come out earlier, or he should stay for his 4th year. And like a couple of years before that, you have Kobe Bryant coming out as a high schooler, and there were some games where you look like he looked so lost. He had no idea what was going on, and he didn't have like moments of brilliance that were like, you're like, oh my gosh, what did that guy just do?
Right.
And you're like, this, if this kid could figure this out. But Tim Duncan was so polished coming into the league.
Yeah.
You know, it's like such a different
game. LeBron James would not have benefited 1% by going to college for a year before going to the NBA. He was ready. He probably could have played in, he's such a freak. He probably could have played in the NBA when he was 16 years old. Just physically, he probably could have done it. A lot of guys can't. And I think that's a real consideration. When I was in college, I wrote a term paper about not necessarily against the high school players coming out, but more of like kind of the cautionary tale of a lot of these kids, their bodies are not ready for what is going to happen when they get to the NBA level. And if you look at the history of the best players that came straight out of high school during that like 95 to 2004, that decade, there are a lot of guys who they had great peaks, but their career did not last nearly as long as it should have, because I think I would hypothesize part of it being they put so much onto their body when their body wasn't ready for it. Tracy McGrady, Jermaine O'Neal, Amari Stoudemire, guys like that who came into the league at a super, super young age and had great 7 years, but they didn't have that long-term career like LeBron or Kobe or some of those guys. And part of it was just like the injuries that they racked up when they were 17, 18 years old. Yeah. Eventually that takes a toll on you. That eventually comes.
Durant is one of the most dominant basketball players alive, and he's rewarded for it with the NBA's ultimate status symbol, the max contract. Nothing says more about a player than the fact that teams would jump at the chance to pay them as much money as they possibly can. It's a testament to the power that someone like Durant can have on a basketball court, and it's what makes the NBA different from other pro sports leagues. The NFL doesn't have a maximum salary for its players, and neither does Major League Baseball, and that changes everything. The going rates for the best players in the league, that's what sets the market for everything else. That's what shapes how NBA teams are assembled. It's also where things get a little murky. For the upcoming season, Durant's max contract will pay him a salary of $42 million. But KD's max salary is actually less than his former teammate Russell Westbrook's max salary. And Westbrook's max is less than James Harden's max, which is less than Steph Curry's max. All of that technically makes sense in its own looping, convoluted way, which is how the majority of NBA business gets done. The exceptions, it can leave you wondering, how do NBA contracts actually work? We should probably start by addressing the elephant that Brandon Marshall dragged into the room.
Y'all don't even know what the y'all talking about, because y'all talking about the NBA. Everybody got guaranteed contracts, and it's false. They do. It's not guaranteed. It's not guaranteed.
The defining feature of NBA contracts is that they're guaranteed by default.
I think Von Miller's saying what a lot of guys are. I'd like to be an NBA dude. When you were now you were a big tough guy, but do NFL players look at NBA players and think guaranteed contracts? They make money on their shoes.
Well, I think the fact of it is they have a much easier life. Let's just say that.
NFL being paid like NBA.
Okay.
Is that ever going to happen?
I don't see it happening. The numbers, look, one, he would never become the highest paid player in the sport just by position. Like, it's going to be a quarterback always. That said, I like his philosophy. I like his mentality and towards I'm trying to raise the tides for all boats.
As he should.
To get, think about it. If you're Odell Beckham, you're going to be the highest paid receiver more than likely soon. That said, that's going to help everyone else in totality, but him being the individual player and the NFL now being comparable to the NBA salaries, it won't happen. You're talking about 15 players versus 53. The issue of injuries is just not going to happen. Up forward is CBA, collective bargaining. I give this to you, you have to give me so much. The players have been reluctant to give everything for that one place, which is guaranteed contract.
Why? That is everything.
That's the only place.
Well, no,
because
because it involves the insurance benefits, retired benefits, the playing conditions as current. So a lot of things go into that consideration. I understand the owners will be nice to just say, here you go. But at the same time, to 53 guys, that the turnover is every 2-3 years.
You need a 14-man roster. Can you make it happen?
As the exposure and influence of the NBA has grown exponentially, so has the cash. While massive contracts are becoming commonplace in almost every major sport, the NBA is on a whole other level. The best paying job in the sports world is an NBA player, by a long shot. The average yearly salary is $7.9 million, which is higher than all other sports and all other leagues on the planet. The next closest are the players of the NFL and MLB at $4.4 million, followed by the English Premier League at $4.1 million, then the NHL at $2.4 million. And that's just the averages. Superstars are making tens of millions more per year. So why do NBA players make so much more money? Pay comes from league profit, right? But the NBA doesn't even have the highest league revenue over the past year. During this time, they're ranked just third out of the top 5 in the world, and third out of the 4 major US sports leagues in this order: NHL, English Premier League, NBA, MLB, and at number 1, the NFL. If your league is making more money, shouldn't the players in that league be making more too? But there's much more to it than just that. There are professional sports leagues that, as a whole, handily make more money than the NBA. The NFL made nearly twice as much as the NBA last year, and the player revenue splits are nearly identical. NBA players take home 50% of what the league makes. The NHL and Premier League are also 50%, NFL at 48%, and MLB at 47 to 50%. For the case of the NFL and MLB, more revenue than the NBA, same percentages. But NBA players make nearly twice that of the NFL, MLB, and Premier League. While you need to be in the top 1% to make it pro in any sport, the NBA has the smallest number of players out of them all. And it's not even close. There are 20 teams in the Premier League, 30 teams in the NBA, 30 in the MLB, 31 in the NHL, and 32 in the NFL. Each NBA team is allowed 15 roster spots, 25 for the Premier League, 48 for the NFL, 40 for the MLB, with 26 players eligible to play each day, and 23 for the NHL. By those numbers, the NBA far and away has the lowest number of total active players in their league at 450, followed by the Premier League at 500, NHL at 713, the MLB at 780, and NFL at 1,536.
For 3 months, and that's all that they needed. There's a lot of guys that get picked early and they become good, solid rotation players. You know, this is a guy who's going to be in the league for 10 or 15 years, and he's going to have a really good career. But then there's a lot of guys that just, for whether it's for injuries or opportunity or work ethic or whatever else, that get drafted high and early, and they never become the player that they are expected to become when they come into the league. And the hard thing with that too is that you got to pay them. You got to pay those guys. Where the NFL, if you got a guy who stinks, he's a second pick in the draft and he stinks, you just cut him. 3 years later, you just say, see you later, man.